So last week, Israel bombed Syria again, right? Big surprise. That happens literally every week. And I was reporting about this, and basically they bombed Latakia. Latakia is on the coast of Syria. It's on the Mediterranean, and it's home to Syria's biggest port. And, you know, they basically, you could see the smoke bellowing out of the containers. You know, this is the Latakia port, and you have containers that were on fire, and this was in the middle of the night. Israel, again, they usually strike Damascus, the suburbs of Damascus. They strike Commentator as well. And this is what happened. Do you know what they struck? Do you know what the Israelis got? Nescafe 3-in-1. So they basically blew up a bunch of food and coffee. And of course, what is the reason that they give? They say, oh, they were striking Iranian targets inside of Syria, right? Like as if that gives them the right to do that in the first place. Like we heard, someone said Iran, quick, go bomb them. That's like if you have someone in your house, which I don't like, so I'm going to come throw a Molotov cocktail at your house because you have a guest that I don't like. This is their logic, right? And how many times have they done this? Here's an article from 2018 from Reuters. And this is just from 2018. They say Israel has struck Iranian targets in Syria 200 times in the last 2 years. So meaning 2016 to 2018, they bombed Syria 200 times. And of course, they don't admit to it, right? Usually, the Israelis don't comment on this. But you're supposed to take their word that there are mean Iranian men standing inside Syria who need to be hit with American-made jets. And so here's an article, for example, from France 24, and they say again, Israel strike targets Iran weapons in Syria port. So basically, they're saying there were Iranian weapons. Well, I don't know about you, man, but Nescafe 3-in-1 does not look much like an Iranian weapon. I'm just saying. Now, of course, you have people who are living in an alternate reality who think that, you know, Israel is some kind of force for good and would never do such a thing. They would never bomb Syrian food. They would never take out infrastructure in Syria. You know, I have news for you. Iran has been sending many ships to Syria in the past months, years with fuel, for example, because Syria is under sanctions. And you have the Americans who are occupying the fields of oil that are in Hasakeh and Deir ez-Zor, so in the northeast and east of Syria. So Syria doesn't have access to its own oil, and it's blocked, you know, from global markets by sanctions. So Iran has been sending fuel, just like Iran's been sending fuel to Venezuela. And Israel's been targeting those ships. It's been, specifically sabotaging those ships to make sure Syrians can't get any oil, can't get any fuel, and other supplies, of course, that will help alleviate sanctions. And you can see here, Israel's been occupying the Golan Heights, the Syrian Golan Heights, since 1967. You have the UN over here. And I mean, literally, even the United States agreed that this occupation is illegal, right? I don't even know how many UN resolutions there are, but they use the Golan Heights to mount these attacks, right? So they'll come in from here, they'll violate Lebanese airspace as well, and they'll go to Damascus and bomb Damascus, or up north to Latakia, and so on. And then the usual excuse that they give is they were bombing Iranian targets. Again, always the same thing. Now, they bombed Syria again just a few days ago. So this is yesterday by now. And they say in TRT World, look at the headline. They say Syrian regime soldier killed in Israeli attack. I love the language, right? A regime soldier, like as if before 2011, you know, if you're a corporal in the Syrian army, you're a Syrian soldier. But after 2011, you're a Syrian regime soldier, right? And then they say regime activates air defenses. And then again, killing a regime soldier. I mean, you could just say a Syrian soldier. You know, when you have a U.S. soldier, for example, who's killed in Afghanistan, you don't say a U.S. regime soldier was killed or a Biden regime soldier was killed. You just say U.S. soldier. But of course, they can't say Syrian soldier. They have to go with the whole propaganda, the regime change nonsense. So they have to put that in there, right? And again, they don't care who they kill. Whether it's civilians, whether it's soldiers, whether it's infrastructure that they're knocking out, this might not seem like much to you guys, but food is scarce in Syria. People have nothing, literally nothing, and they're under sanctions. They're 10 years of war, and this is a drop of water compared to the other damages that these countries have done to Syria. But I just want to show you how obscene these arguments are. The press, they just blindly repeat this idea that, yeah, Israel was bombing Syria, And they're not going to admit to it, but you have to trust us, it was Iranian targets. And they're implying that it's somehow justified because it has Iran in the name. Or Hezbollah is another one, right? Yeah, they're bombing Syria, but look, they were bombing Hezbollah, right? We hate those guys. Iran, we hate them even more. That's good, right? This is their logic. And that's how they condition you to accepting this nonsense. That's an act of war. You know, if someone bombs your country, that's an act of war. And they do this every single week. And that's not all, of course. I want to show you a very quick clip from Al Jazeera. This is Mehdi Hassan interviewing the head of the Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, the former head. And look at what he says here about Israel's involvement in the Syrian war.
Say no preference. There have been reports that Israel has been treating wounded Syrian rebel fighters in its hospitals on the border, including fighters from Nusra Front, which is, of course, the al-Qaeda proxy in Syria. Do those reports worry you that Israel's helping wounded al-Qaeda aligned fighters?
As I said before, in a different context, it's always useful also to deal with your enemies in a humane way. And I think that when you have people who are wounded and you can deal with them in a humane way, the considerations as to whether to take them in are not simply whether it's politically useful or whether it's politically
So it's purely humanitarian, you say? So there's no tactical or political strategic...
I didn't say there's no tactical. I said the main consideration, the immediate consideration is humane.
But the tactical issues involved, I mean, you know better than me the phrase blowback. You don't think there's going to be blowback against Israel if you get into bed with a group like Nusra Front?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be blowback.
Why?
Because I think that, unfortunately, the rules of the game in Syria are such that you can do anything that is not possible to be done anywhere else.
Yeah, I think people said that in Afghanistan too. Would you also treat Hezbollah fighters?
No, I would not treat...
Have you not just contradicted what you told me 60 seconds ago about humanely treating your enemies?
No. I think as far as Hezbollah...
That's amazing, right? So Israel will give medical assistance. It's not hypothetical. They've done this, right? It's real. They will give medical assistance, and that's, of course, just scratching the surface. There are other forms of assistance, like acting as an air force, to Al-Qaeda, right? It goes under different names in Syria, Al-Nusra Front, and then you have Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. So Israel will help them, but Hezbollah is worse, right? So you know, Al-Qaeda that has attacked the U.S. in Africa, right? Blown up embassies in Africa. They've hit the World Trade Center. All of these things. Yeah, Israel will help them, no problem, because it serves their agenda of regime change inside Syria. And that's just, again, this is just one facet of the war on Syria. But do you see what Israel's doing there? The guy's just like openly saying, like, yeah, we've done it. So what? Of course we treat Al-Qaeda in a humane way. Like, yeah, it's incredible, right? So they bomb Syria, they're helping Al-Qaeda in Syria, and then, you know, they want to come along and say, oh no, it's Iranian targets. No. This is much deeper than that. This is much deeper than that. It shows you their hypocrisy and who the real terrorists are. They're literally in bed with Al-Qaeda. They're helping Al-Qaeda. They're nursing these Al-Qaeda fighters, you know, putting them in hospital beds, giving them food, giving them shelter, you know, nursing them back to health so they can go and kill Syrians. I mean, just completely shameless. Completely shameless, you know? And that's what they've been doing. They've been taking advantage of the fact that Syria is at war on multiple fronts. You got the Israelis occupying the Golan Heights to the south. Turkey and you know, the rebels that it's backing are occupying Idlib to the north. And then the east and northeast are occupied by the U.S. and the SDF that they've allied themselves with. You know, they've torn Syria into like 3-4 different parts. And they love it. And Israel just adds to that. You know, keep Syria in chaos, keep it in turmoil, make sure that the infrastructure is blown to bits, make sure there's no fuel coming in, make sure the sanctions are really working, make sure that, you know, there's no proper counterterrorism there. Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, make sure that they and the Syrian army can't actually fight Al-Qaeda. Let's go help Al-Qaeda. Unbelievable.